back to Delusions of Grandeur. I am one of your hosts, but tonight we are going to continue our superhero month into the realm of some of Dane's imaginary superheroes. Um, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the movie for our pre-show here and what it's all about?
Well, I didn't know you made Superman up, Dane.
I didn't either. So, Dane, it looks like you're talking there, but I'm not hearing a thing.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure the Power Rangers really did save us from Eye of the News, man. I think that actually happened.
Yeah, you have that chapter in fifth grade world studies as well.
Yeah. I mean, I was always under the impression this was a documentary. So.
All right. So what's up?
So
maybe he needs to sign off.
We're waiting for Dane to get on.
Again.
I guess I'll explain what the movie is. So the film is Superman, and it was filmed in 1978, and it was directed by Richard Donner.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if any of you know who Richard Donner is, but he was a director of some, and he had kind of a falling out with this movie. So
yes,
well,
he actually directed my Meet the Cast pick, Maverick. Not to mention the Lethal Weapon series and Omen and a handful of other random movies.
And
the Goonies, isn't that Dick Donner?
I believe it was.
Yeah.
Good times.
I feel like I remember reading something where it was like, yeah, Richard Donner doesn't really like kids or something like that. That had to have been a fun set to be on.
Hello.
You back?
Yeah, can everyone hear me now?
You're very quiet.
Super quiet.
Very quiet. Super quiet.
Yeah.
You need the Superman voice.
Or maybe we need the Superman hearing.
Let me keep fiddling with it. Hang on a second.
It took me a minute going through the mic and cam settings to select the right mic, because sometimes it'll go to the worst one first.
Right.
How about now?
Yeah,
that's better.
There he is.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. I like this mic a lot, but it does kind of fuck with my computer a little bit in the sense that, like, when I try to play iTunes while I have this plugged in, then I can't hear the iTunes file. So it does weird things. But anyway, some of the presets do kind of change things up. So I assume Dave introduced the movie, which was 1978
movie, but
Superman.
I did not tell what it was about.
Okay, well, just to be clear, this film was the first, well, actually not the first, because there were some theatrical serials and there was like a kind of Saturday matinee film, Superman,
Drunk
the Mole
Superman.
Man. Yeah, but as far as like, big blockbuster, big budget, Superman films, this was the very first one. It came out the year after Star Wars, Episode 4, A New Hope, came out the year after that, and I think it goes without saying that this film would not exist in the way that it does without Star Wars having really reintroduced the American public to the grandiose space opera from the 30s and a little bit of the 40s. Because, Superman as a concept, debuted in Action Comics #1 in 1938. And so it was very much in that milieu. And obviously, as Superman's history expanded, it owed so much to the groundwork that something like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and everything had set up, much like how Star Wars did. And so this particular adaptation was all about Superman's origins, his first embracing his destiny to be able to show earth, a better path, more of a path of nobility and advancement. And along the way, he's having to learn how to fulfill his destiny, but also grappling with some pretty heavy human emotions because despite being Kryptonian, he was raised by humans and does very much feel like he's trying to find his place in our world. And in a world that has kind of gone cynical and awry from the small town values that he was raised with and the kind of nobler Kryptonian values that his father, Jor-El, instills in him from afar. And so, yeah, it's all about him trying to find his place in the world amidst the cynical, manipulators of the world embodied by Lex Luthor, the greatest criminal mind of our time, trying to use and abuse people. Yes, well, trying to use and abuse people just like so many people in the world today, and especially in the 70s, were doing. And this is very much a movie of its time in terms of. Well, I brought up Star Wars because Star Wars, in many ways, gets a lot of credit for helping to lift the general public kind of out of the cynicism of the 70s and kind of into a reawareness of hope and possibilities and everything. And then I would argue that Superman does that more directly because, well, Superman as a symbol has always been about, truth and justice. And then they added the American way in the 50s when we had to not be associated with those goddamn commies. He's always been a symbol of what we, as humans, what we should aspire to be. And so they really hammer that home here. And before we go any further, just to make it clear, there are multiple cuts of this film. There's the theatrical cut, and this is the one that's on 4K. And then if you have the older release of all the Christopher Reeve and Brandon Routh, films here, this set, which is most people know about this set, it has the theatrical cut, and then it has the very slightly longer Richard Donner expanded edition, his preferred cut. And then, but the one we're talking about is the one that I have never seen. So this was my first time watching this cut, which was the 3-hour television version. And and it also comes with the Richard Donner preferred cut. But yeah, this is the 3-hour TV version that premiered on ABC, and it was because the Salkinds, I guess, had they had the rights to the ownership of the Superman IP is actually much more complicated than you would think. Even though it is under the Warner Brothers and DC umbrella, the actual ownership and licensing of the character is more complicated than that. So at the time, in like the 80s, the Salkinds still had the rights and the ability to creatively say, we'll let the studio or whatever, the ABC will let them use all this footage that was out of the theatrical cut to expand it to 3 hours to show it in 2 parts and thus have more commercial time, more revenue, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
But Richard Donner still, like, this version is, well, this version is 151 minutes. The theatrical cut is like 142. And then this cut is 188 minutes. So this is by far the longest cut. And I have to say, I just finished this particular release and this restoration, and it looks really, really good. Now, granted, it's only 1080p, so it's not, going to be 4K, but you have the original theatrical cut preserved this way, and you have this 3-hour cut. So it's obviously grainier, but I was afraid that it was going to be like a 4:3, butchering or whatever, but no, it's what you want it to be. So if you want like the full blown ginormous epic version of the story, which it already kind of is that, then this is the one to watch. And
I've been planning myself picking up a copy, but if you really don't want to go 4K or anything like that, then you go with this 14 disc sucker.
Yeah, that's the DVD one.
Which
go ahead.
Which has the Richard Donner cuts and the theatrical cuts in them as well, and some a bunch of extras. So
Okay.
I
What
know
they
that
really need to do is do the
Mo
commie cuts.
has the dumbed down version of it, but
Dude, we need the commie cut of Superman where they digitally
Right.
replace Arnold Schwarzenegger in Red Heat with Christopher
There you go.
Reeves.
Well, I mean,
That'd be amazing.
technically, there's a. Go ahead.
I was going to say, technically, Schwarzenegger did screen. I think he did screen test, or at least he wanted to for the role, but they said he
Yeah.
had too
Well, he
much of an
wasn't.
accent.
Well, that and I don't even think Pumping Iron, the documentary that he was in before he really
Right.
became an actor, I don't think that was even out at the time.
Right. He wasn't a star yet, or at least not as an actor. He was.
Yeah.
Weightlifter.
He was just a bodybuilder at that
Right.
time, and obviously a really, really well-known one.
Right.
But just to keep us on track here, so this particular cut, just a few minutes ago, this was the first time that I'd seen this cut, but I had seen the other cuts, and I think the very first cut I would have ever seen would have been it's from Blockbuster, so I want to say it might have been the original home video cut, which is actually shorter than the theatrical cut, and I saw that when I was a kid. But and keep in mind at that time, superhero films weren't a dime a dozen like they are today, and so Superman's still this particular and I watched like the Adventures of Superman in reruns. I watched Superman the animated series. I read tons of the old comics, so I was pretty well rooted in Superman, and so then you see that film, and especially at that time, it's like it's even more special. But not to say that it's less special today. I still would consider it probably in terms of the best superhero film. I think it probably is still king, just because it's so foundational to everything we know about the genre. But yeah, as far as first time viewing, that's kind of you have to kind of do it a couple different ways depending on which cut you watch. But this particular cut, this is my first time seeing it. What about everyone else?
this was this was my first time seeing the entire cut. Myself. So I'm trying to think of what actually was different, because it's been a while since I've seen the Donner cut and the theatrical. So I guess you guys are going to have to help me out on that one.
Well, there were several things that jumped out at me right away, because I had watched I'd watched I can't remember if it was the theatrical cut or the Donner cut, one of those two. I had watched it not that long ago to where it was still kind of in my mind pretty clearly. Plus, I do know the movie pretty well. There were some things that stuck out to me as far as little extensions of things, like you see an establishing shot of New York City. I mean Metropolis. You see that right before the
New York City.
Yeah, right before the interior of the taxi cab. You see just little extensions of scenes here and there. You see, just different ways to kind of flesh out certain characters a little bit more. My favorite scenes that were extended or introduced entirely that were new, I really loved the additional dialogue for the first Fortress of Solitude scene, just because that's my favorite scene in the whole film, because I feel like thematically that's where the film really comes into focus. And so you get a little bit of extra dialogue that kind of helps to flesh out the fact that Jor-El, has anticipated the kinds of things that his son will ask him, that it's not, his, in other words, it's not a perfect, godlike version of him or anything. And just, there's that, plus the little coda at the end with finding out that, Lex was going to kill Miss Tessmacher, and, Superman stops him. And, that was just kind of nice, because in the other cuts, it's like she just kind of disappears from the movie. So just it was a lot of little things. Nothing major or anything, but it definitely does. If you want, because I mean, I've just heard the film described as an epic, and it most definitely is. But if you want that full epic experience of an already epic film, then I think the full 3-hour cut is definitely the way to go. Now, keep in mind that the film was shot concurrently with Superman 2, but
Right.
because of budget overruns and scheduling overruns and everything, and because of Richard Donner clashing with the Salkinds, they were like, well, we need to put all our resources together to finish the first film, which, makes sense, but they also booted Donner off the second one, even though it was almost all the way shot already. And so that's why if you watch the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, which is much better than the theatrical cut of Superman 2, if you watch it, there's a reason why the ending of the Richard Donner cut, why it's the same spinning the Earth backwards thing. It's because this movie was supposed to end in the following way: Superman would have shot the one off into space, the missile off into space, and it would have hit the Phantom Zone triangle prism thing, and out would have come Zod and Ursa and the other person who's never actually named in this film. They would have burst out, and then the title card would have said Superman will return in Superman 2, and then the ending of Superman 2 was going to be spinning the Earth backwards, but they liked the effects so much that they moved it up to the first one. Now, I do think thematically it does manage to provide for it provides for a more spectacular ending. Plus, it does kind of fit into that whole like, what's my purpose? Am I allowed to, be a vulnerable human being, or must I be this symbol of hope and all that stuff? And it's him realizing that he is a. Him realizing that he has a heart and it is breaking, and that he has fragility. That even though he is Superman, he still has vulnerabilities, and it doesn't really get fully paid off in Superman 2 like it was supposed to, except in the Richard Donner cut, where you do kind of see some of the consequences of him having made that choice, because eventually, you see him starting to make some of those choices that will affect his ability to speak to his father, and just some of those you see more of the repercussions of that choice than you do here. um but anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So anybody else, was this their first time seeing this cut or any other cut or whatever?
Well, I
My
guess I
first-
should go.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I guess I should. I guess I should admit that when you get films like this with multiple cuts, especially if it's a classic film that you probably grew up with, and you may not, when you were a kid, have really known or cared what cut you were watching. Truth be told, I have no freaking clue what cuts I watched growing up. I have no idea. I might have been watching the theatrical cut. I might have seen it on TV at one point. I have no flipping idea. I know that I've seen the film at least a few times throughout my life, probably dating back to when I was a young kid. And I misinterpreted which cut we were doing this time. I watched the Donner cut. So I have no idea if I've watched the complete 3-hour cut or not. No idea. I do know that the Donner cut, I felt like, I know there were added scenes. Like, I think specifically the scene where Superman is at the Fortress of Solitude and is wondering if he's allowed to enjoy what he's doing was apparently added.
Yeah, the
and
vanity
then
part.
Right. And then I think one of the scenes with Luthor, Otis, and Tessmacher was added. And I know a lot of those scenes were extended. Like you said, there was a lot more explanation for Tessmacher than there was that I remembered there being. So personally, I don't know if it really matters. Honestly, given what the Sulkins did to the entire project, I could give a shit if I see the entire Sulkin sponsored cut. I think that they honestly, what they did to Richard Donner, and they dicked over several people. Now, admittedly, from all accounts, Marlon Brando probably had it coming to him, but they dicked him over. That's why he's not in the second movie. They just really completely took hold of the property and said, we're going to do what we want.
Yeah.
You know, they fired Richard Donner because the first film was a success. Now, who does that?
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
that-
it's
you know.
a double-edged sword at the same
Right.
time, because like it was their tenacity, well, and Richard Donner's as well, but it was the Salkinds in particular. Like, I don't think it's like, yeah, I would rather that they have kept Richard Donner on, but at the
Right.
same time, it was their tenacity with the
Right.
property in general that got it past the, you know, oh, this is a guy flying around in his underwear. It got it past all that.
One could argue what got it past that with the sponsors was them getting Marlon Brando on board in the first place.
Yeah.
And Mario Puzo.
And
Gene
Mario
Hackman.
Puzo. And well, Hagman was partly wowed by the fact that Brando and
And
Puzo
Marlon
were
Brando.
involved. And yeah,
Well, and
it's like,
there's actually a really amusing story with Marlon Brando, because, well, we
there's
all
a
know
lot of
that
amusing stories.
yes, there are. There are no shortage of them with Marlon Brando, but there's a particularly amusing story when it comes to Superman, because well, so they thought of Marlon Brando because for screenwriting, and again, I give the Salkinds all manner of credit for this. They said, okay, we're gonna approach this property, we're gonna approach it seriously, and to show that, we're gonna get Mario fucking Puzo of The Godfather, you know, the novel and the script. You know, we're gonna get him to
exactly
tackle
what they put on the press release.
Exactly. Well, it's like they said, you know, we're gonna show people that we're taking this seriously, and we're gonna get like the best writer in the biz at that time. And so through him, they were able to say, oh, you know, we'll get Marlon Brando as well. And Marlon Brando, in the negotiations for the film, because it was Tom Mankiewicz was also there. He gets credited as creative consultant. They had a couple different writers on this, but yeah, yeah, well, he also was pretty. Tom Mankiewicz was pretty instrumental in helping to kind of coordinate everything. But they're having a meeting, trying to court him towards the idea. And Marlon Brando, who just, well, he loved to fuck with people, but he also, in doing so, he also was able to tell if they were genuine or if they were phonies or not, because Hollywood's full of phonies, and he couldn't stand that, which I can't blame him. So like he was fucking with them by saying, well, what if, you know, the people of Krypton, what if they're all like, you know, sentient, you know, typewriters, and what if they all make
But they look like a
and
bagel.
exactly. Well, he was just fucking with them in any way that he could, and instead of being yes men like he feared that they would be, they said no, that's not what it's about, and so that told him that, okay, you know, they're taking this thing seriously. So he was like,
man,
that's
the cut of the movie we need.
But see, like Marlon Brando was just trolling
cut.
the shit. But Marlon, I don't remember if it was typewriters, but it was something like that. But it was
or the bagels,
you know,
whatever. I'm down with both those ideas.
Oh, yeah,
it was some ridiculous thing that he clearly just thought off the top of his head. But he, especially like because he could afford to do it, and because Marlon Brando was very self-destructive, but he was Marlon Brando. He was immensely talented, but he was kind of trolling the shit out of people, largely because he was so disgusted by the phoniness that he was surrounded with. So, you know, like, yeah, he was a prima donna, but at the same time, like, I can kind of understand his reasoning because he wanted to know who was serious about it or whatever. But it was because he knew that they were taking it seriously. Obviously, they got a screenwriter who was taking it seriously, producers that were, and a director that was. Then it all kind of helped to have it come together. Now, granted, it wasn't overly serious because they still had plenty of comedy in the piece, but you know, that allowed it to have a good kind of all around balance of emotion, because you've got drama, you've got sci-fi, you got romance, you got comedy, you got a bit of tragedy. You know, it's just got this ginormous scope that it's like, well, it's kind of got everything you want in a movie, let alone a superhero movie, let alone the essentially big screen, big budget debut of the first superhero, without
Mhm.
whom none of the other superheroes that we know and love would be possible.
Mhm.
So, do we get to Brandon or Mo for?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have seen this film a number of times over the years, especially when it comes to just as a child. It was all over the TV, and it was just really cool. It was like a really awesome thing to see a superhero film, to see these characters on the big screen, to see a man fly in a realistic fashion, not the
Right,
fashion of the old school black and white Superman, which I
right.
guess was impressive in its own way.
For its day,
Um,
probably.
Well, and to be
but
fair, the Adventures of Superman show is still really damn good to this day for what it is.
but coming back to it, I mean, I had a couple of things I had thought about the 3 hour cut because I'd never seen it before. I knew which one I hadn't seen because, well, it's extended Krypton scene, the whole feeding Miss Tessmacher to the lion scene. These were things that I knew I hadn't seen before. Because you
Yeah, I
remember that
definitely
sort
didn't
of
see
thing.
that. Definitely did not see that.
So I looked at that, and there were two things that I was thinking of. One, I was comparing it in my mind to Man of Steel,
Mhm.
which, if we ever come back for Superman 2, I feel like that's a more apt comparison.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
I do like Superman, the original Superman, better than I like the Man of Steel, because I like Christopher Reeve's portrayal, because Superman's made to be a little bit
Right,
campier.
right.
But
And he did
when
it
we get
so
to
well. He did it so well. Like he wasn't campy.
yeah,
He just had that little bit of like he was just square enough to be over the top, but he also had that little bit of quirky humor, so it worked well.
Well,
but
and
my
he was so
oh,
sincere, you know.
Right.
that was the idea that I felt like really trumped the Man of Steel
Hmm.
movie. But as far as the 3 hour cut,
Hmm.
I felt it was interesting at parts, but when you already have a fairly long movie,
Hmm.
I felt it was un. Oh, okay, there's a lot of crackling going on
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that was me.
Uh, but I felt like it was kind of unnecessary with the
Right.
length wise. I felt like, yeah, this is stuff that's interesting, but I felt like it's something that, you could go with a TV movie like that. Those are meant to be long, but as far as
Hmm.
like watching it in one sitting as a theatrical, no, not in the slightest. I felt like
It's hard to pull
the
that
Donner
off.
cut,
Right.
the Donner cut or the theatrical cut were
Right.
perfectly fine by my opinion.
If you were watching it over 2 nights on TV, it probably wouldn't seem nearly so long. I could
Exactly.
understand
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
In a single
The
sitting, it's you really got to
yeah.
have it knit together
Right.
perfect for it to not feel like a bit of a slog at points. I mean, not everything can be
Right.
Seven Samurai, you know.
Right. And I want to mention as well the Man of Steel connection. There was one point where I was vividly thinking about it, and I meant to mention in my early impressions that I never was a fan of the Superman comics. I've read a lot more as I've gotten older, mostly the New 52 version. I never got into Superman because I thought he was dull and
Nice. Okay,
boring.
I'm not
Same,
alone.
same thing as like Captain America and Thor. Until the movies came along, I thought they were the most boring, square, uninteresting characters. But then Chris Evans came along, Chris Hemsworth came along, they killed those roles. And absolutely, now I like those characters. But it was the same thing. Growing up, I was into X-Men, Spider-Man, and Batman. That was my big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So but I always liked the Superman movie. I always enjoyed the movie. I thought it was really fun. So I was just curious. One little thing I did notice that I had forgotten about the film, but it's similar to the Man of Steel connection. In the comics, did Clark's adoptive father die really young? I don't
No,
remember that because it happens in both movies.
not at all. As a matter of fact, I was going to say my initial introduction to Superman really was
Right.
what was one of the things that really got me into comics. There were
Right.
a couple of things that got me into comics. And the main one was the death of Superman by Doomsday. That really
I do
pulled me
remember that
in.
story.
And
I also remember the book Doomsday.
and you could actually see there's actually a big story arc where Pa Kent has a heart attack, and he gets in touch with Superman's spirit in the afterlife and brings him back to his body, which sets up the
don't know why
and
that's
Funeral
funny.
for a Friend.
Nice.
It's kind of Funeral for a Friend was kind of an offbeat story that
Right.
touched the death and reign of the Superman. And so he was around for a while. I think he's dead now, but
Yeah.
I find
he
it
was alive a
interesting.
long time.
I find it interesting that his death is such a pivotal moment in both films.
Well, here's the thing that I need to make very, very clear when it comes to DC characters versus Marvel. Marvel has, for most of its history, with some exceptions, but for most of it, more or less kept continuity relatively consistent. Like with not as bad as DC though. 'Cause DC will fucking obliterate continuity whenever it's convenient.
Yeah.
Sometimes multiple times in the same story arcs.
Yeah,
Amazing. It's a talent.
if they even follow it at all. So whenever you're talking about any DC character, especially Batman or Superman, you have to talk about like, well, which version are you talking about? Who's writing it? Like, because Superman, when he first debuted in Action Comics #1 in 1938, all that he was strong. And so, like, he couldn't even fly. He jumped high and
leaped tall buildings in a single bound. You know?
Right.
And that was all that he could do. Now, anything else, like running fast or whatever, that was all a result of his immense strength. So it was all a derivative of that one power. But then as more writers came on and, as he expanded into other media, like the radio show was where he was able to fly for the first time. Plus, that's where Kryptonite came from. So all these different elements of Superman that we know, they did kind of get introduced gradually, and even in this film, this was 1978, so you still had the criminal mastermind, eccentric mad scientist.
Yeah.
For Lex Luthor, you did not have, from John Byrne in the 80s, you did not have the 1980s white collar criminal Lex Luthor. Now he was still wealthy, of course, in this film, but like you didn't have the corporate tycoon, the hiding in plain sight, type villain that he would later become from then on. And to be honest, in live action on the big screen, we still haven't fully had that. I mean, Michael, blanking on his name, Jesse Eisenberg. Yeah, what he was doing was he was a more like young, kind of entitled, wealthy kid who is also psychotic, which is a different take on Lex Luthor. But
he was a psychotic Silicon Valley reject, basically.
Basically, and we haven't really had the the closest that we had to the Lex Luthor I always wanted to see on screen. The closest that we had was actually Kevin Spacey, who was, I think he actually did a better job than Gene Hackman, but it was only, he could have done even better if he hadn't been trying to still be the Gene Hackman version.
He was trying.
He was trying, but he also was trying to be more like comic book Lex in terms of like how he looked, how he acted, the fact that he was a lot more sinister and cold, and like that's, to me, that's who Lex Luthor is. But he wasn't always that way.
I would argue nowadays, based again on my mostly modern experience with the comics, more recently, Luthor has almost been rebranded as an anti-hero. He's like, he wants to protect the Earth from Superman. That's basically it.
Well, they did a really cool, like, I forget what it was called, but it was where it's like from Lex's point of view.
No, it's Lex Luthor.
To borrow a line from one of mine and Brandon's sort of favorite, not so awesome anime, but this is a great line. he is in many ways Superman's best friend and greatest enemy.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, well, the one that Mo was talking about was called Lex Luthor, Man of Steel.
There you
And,
go. Yeah, where like
right.
Superman looks like a demon anytime Lex is seeing him, and it's all from his point of view. So you
exactly.
you
Well,
really
and-
get
and-
that feel like he's actually not a bad guy, you know.
Well, and that's they kind of transplanted for the DC extended universe version of Superman. They kind of took that role and gave it to Bruce Wayne, as far as like trying to be an ordinary person who also has tremendous earthly power in the form of wealth, trying to use that wealth to protect the Earth from what he sees as a threat. So they did transplant that same idea and gave it to Bruce Wayne, but you know, and it's a worthy concern in today's world that someone that powerful could be a danger. Now, granted, they don't really touch on that here so much, just because it's so clear that this Superman is 100% a good guy and always has been and always will be, because of his earthly values and his Kryptonian values, because he's raised to be a good human being, but he's also raised to be more than that. He's raised up to be the symbol of what humans can be. And I would assume it's also because of the fact that Krypton, you know, that Kryptonians went through their own primitive phase as well in order to get where they got. So Jor-El already knows that humans can get there. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chosen Earth for his son.
See, I
Tell
like
you what, though, apparently you need to watch your hot dogs around him.
Oh
From
yeah,
what I hear.
we've never actually talked to Mo.
Yeah, trying to get
What you
there.
got, Mo?
Oh, yeah, I'm with Jake. I have no clue what cut I saw. Whatever the hell came home from the video store, you know. This time I watched, I think, the extended cut. It was like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I was mostly transfixed with how good Gene Hackman looks in a swimming cap. That was definitely something I took away from.
And styling 70s wing collars and everything. Like,
Oh man, and Marlon
man.
Brando's delicious white hair. Like I just want to run my fingers through that shit.
I do have to say, this does have an interesting connection with the other Richard Donner film, again, with Maverick. I talked on that one about how sad it is that we never got to see more of Jodie Foster, the comedian, because she was so good in that one. But in this one and Young Frankenstein, Gene Hackman showed that he was a brilliant comedic actor. But he looked down his nose at comedy. He didn't want to be taken as a comedic actor. And that was one of the reasons he almost was it.
He could be so charming on screen, especially
he could be. And I guess you could count Royal Tenenbaums in that group too, because he did.
Oh
he
God, I love that movie.
He did do a couple of comedic roles over the years, but he was afraid of being labeled a comedic actor. And I'm like, when you got that level of talent, just do what you want to do and don't care what people think. And he did. He retired, and now he's a novelist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, you gotta do what you feel is best, but at the same time, like, you know, I think doing comedy is very hard, especially if you're not used to it. But at the same time, if you cast people right, then you can take a dramatic actor and, like the way that Gene Hackman approaches Lex Luthor is the way that you should approach the character, in the sense that, well, I think as an actor, every actor in a film, like, you should act as though the movie's about you, even if it's not, just because that will help to, well, sell the character. But Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, like 100%, you know, he's like, this is my movie, this is my, you know, it's everything's about me, which is perfect for Lex Luthor. And so, you know, he can be as eccentric and as, you know, I don't give a fuck about anything but myself. You know, he can be as much of that as he wants, and therefore it comes off as funny because the rest of the characters have to act around that. So, you know,
one thing that I think is consistent in most presentations of Luthor is that in most cases, he is the smartest dude in the room, and he knows it. He definitely played the more comedic version of that in this one. Like, he had that one line where he's like, Otis, does the number 200 mean for you and for me? It's your weight and my IQ.
That's right. Which,
Or when he's up on the bookshelf and
Right.
he's like, "What do you see? See more as being a genius concept? The fact that a piece of bubblegum wrap can tell you the
Oh yeah.
of the world or some shit like that."
so someone can read War and Peace and
Right.
think it's just a simple adventure story. Other people can read the back of a chewing gum wrapper and unlock the secrets of the universe. Which that's kind of a ridiculous line, but it also is kind of profound, and it really shows the way he thinks. Because
you got to remember that was bookended by comments from Tessmacher as well, and like she responded like, "Lex, who gets the secrets of the universe from a bubblegum wrapper?" And he just looks at her like, "My point exactly." But before that, they were looking at that news article, and it was like he read the one thing, and then she was totally focused on his height and his build and all this stuff, and that's when he's like, someone could read War.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it is. He's absolutely right, though. I mean, and in fact, a lot of the great minds have derived some like world-changing ideas from something really mundane. I mean, look at Isaac Newton with an apple. It's like that's like the ultimate example right there. But the one thing that I thought about with I'm always amazed with this film, on top of just how good the cinematography is, always has been. I was really struck by just how good the script is and how good the dialogue is for. Well, they give our two most intelligent characters, Jor-El and Lex Luthor, give them the majority of the exposition for like what Superman's powers are and why he has to keep a secret identity, why he can't just be flying around every well, he says 28 hours a day, but then he's like 24. Why he can't do that and why kryptonite would affect him adversely and all these things. And they managed to get out all that exposition, but in a way that feels very natural. And you understand why those characters would say those things. Plus the scene with Lois doing the interview with Superman, like you get more exposition there, but you also get a tremendous amount of sexual tension between them, and you see after having
Pink.
Pink, and also how big are you? How big are you? I'm tall. How tall are you?
Yes.
That I think that you get, and that wouldn't be what it is without having established how she just does not give Clark the time of day, doesn't really care about anything or anyone except her work. But then it's Superman that can just melt her in her seat, and it's like it's such a great contrast. But you also believe that this person would do that because she lives so much in the realm of the current, the provable, and then when someone comes along and defies every single one of those things, it's like mind blowing, quite literally. And I mean, I think for most people, let alone most women in the film, and especially at that time, because it was very popular with couples, because the romance was really really strong. I imagine that a lot of women would probably be in their shoes because, like, ball busting career women or not, they would definitely be just like, how is this possible? And and plus the fact that he's just so like genuinely good natured. He doesn't have any of the ulterior motives that she's used to and that most of the country was used to at that time. And I mean, they actually make a few funny cracks at Jimmy Carter, who they kind of imply is the president because of like eating the peanuts or whatever, which because he was a peanut farmer prior to entering politics. So like I picked up on that this time, and I thought that was kind of amusing. But so it was definitely a product of its time, but it also was kind of what provided a way out in a way for audiences of that time, and it really did reinvigorate the character. But as far as the go ahead, David.
I know that when I was growing up, this movie was like the movie to watch. That was a superhero film, at least at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
none of the Batmans had come out, and I don't think I was
60s
alive
Batman.
when it first
Yeah.
came out, but it was
Well,
definitely
the first Burton Batman came out when I was 8, and I remember I was old enough to think about seeing Returns in the theater, and I think we did, but we were young enough that it was like,
Well, I
There
mean,
was
they
60s Batman in theaters back
yeah,
then.
there was. I mean, they did approach Batman the right way in the sense that it was kind of the polar opposite of the way that they approached Superman,
right?
which is appropriate because Batman and Superman are totally different characters and they're kind of two sides of the same coin. But um, but it's at the same time like this movie was so foundational for the genre because it really did establish why superheroes are important, the fact that these characters could be taken seriously and they could appeal to everyone and do appeal to everyone, that there's a lot more to them than a lot of like really snooty critics like to think. um, that they actually have quite a lot of cultural importance and always have. And also that even if you're not really a superhero fan, that these characters can make for some legitimately great cinema and legitimately great storytelling that's up there with the
well,
mythological heroes of the past or the folkloric heroes of the past.
the way I
And go
the
ahead.
way I look at Superman now is like we said in our Into the Spider-Verse conversation. When you think about it, anyone could put on the cape and become Superman. You know, anyone could be the guy that saves the world. You know,
Well,
so
that's the debate, though, because see, to me, that's the debate. Is I don't think that just anybody can, because there has to be. I think that's the Zack Snyder take on it. That he's an everyman, he is just a man, and that's the point. That anybody could put on the cape. But I feel like the original intent was that not just anybody could.
Right. This
Not
one
just
had
anybody had that level of goodness, that level of purity. That is what makes Superman Superman.
and that's actually I think part of where Luthor is coming from in most of these interpretations we were talking about, and where Batman is coming from, that level of cynicism of you can't trust a man with that much power. Like there's you get people like Luthor and Batman who use their wealth to help them be on the level playing field, but they do it partly so that they can make sure that there is a referee out there, because Superman could literally do whatever he wants theoretically.
Well, and it's
Brightburn
and
is a
in
good
some
story about that too.
in some interpretations he does. Like I think there's one version where
I love the Injustice storyline.
Yeah, there's one version where he like forcibly becomes the president of the United States, and but it's I would kind of say yes and no to that statement, just because I think that not anyone can put on the cape, because the whole point is that he's the last son of Krypton, he's the last of his kind, he feels alone in the universe. And I mean, Man of Steel,
the last of his kind. Until you meet Zod and Supergirl and all the others, but
well, it depends on which version that you're talking about, because some versions really hammer that home. Other versions are like, oh yeah, he's the last son of Krypton, but then there's all these other people, and then you had someone like John Byrne come in and go, no, he is the last son of Krypton. None of these other weirdos, So it just really depends on which version you're talking about. Now, I think for sure when he starts out in whatever version you're talking about, as far as he knows, he is the last son of Krypton. And he still carries that that weight inside of him, and so he knows that he is unlike anyone else on this planet, and and again, the DCEU interpretation hammers home the idea that he is an alien, and he really has to do a lot more work to figure out, well, what is his place in the universe, and does he even have a responsibility to be the savior of the world? And that's really what, especially Batman v Superman, that's really what that's grappling with, and it gets set up in Man of Steel, and I assume will be properly paid off in the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. But that was that was like the intent behind it, was to say, well, who's to say that he has to be the savior of the world, or that he has to do anything? Could he just be a conqueror? Could he just be a whatever? I mean, they really call that into question. Well, they really call that into question in that interpretation, and that's what makes it different from this film, where it's very clear what his destiny is to be, because Jor-El knows they can be a great people, Kal-El, they wish to be, they only lack the light to show the way. And there's a lot of like explicitly Christian themes running through all of that, and some Mosaic ones too, but the Jesus and Moses, they parallel each other. But also, so it's a different. That's why the Man of Steel interpretation. That's why I like it, because it stands apart from this, where it's more about like, what is my destiny? Whereas here, where I have my destiny, how do I fulfill it, and also try to relate to these people that I've tried so hard to be like, and I want to be like so badly. But I know that I'll never fully be that, and yet I'm grappling with all these very human-like emotions. That's really what the story's about. And I think that now, as far as like, yeah, he's the only one, but also by putting on the cape, by being that symbol, he allows himself to say, well, yeah, I have the cape and these powers, but everybody can aspire to be what I represent. So, in a metaphorical sense, I think he is inspiring people to try to emulate him. But in actuality, yes, indeed, he is the only one who can really put on the cape and do what he can do. So that's why I say yes and no to that.
And it's like, and where I am right now, actually, with the Supergirl series, they've gone full tilt into that exact storyline of Supergirl is straight up furious at her friends for trying to put on the cape and be heroes. And she's like, no, you don't have these powers. Stay out of it for your own protection.
Yeah.
And so there are definitely versions where you can say, like, yeah, it's kind of some of them are more inclusive. Like Arrow, for example, I think is a more inclusive in terms of theoretically anyone could do that. Some of them are much more like, some of them like Superman. Shazam is another one where you really couldn't say that's an everyman story.
Well, again, yes,
it is and it isn't. I mean, he's a chosen one.
He is a chosen one. I would argue that Shazam, as a formerly known as Captain Marvel, I think that Shazam as a character, I think you could argue that he is more of an everyman type of character, just because he's a kid. Now, granted, he was chosen because he had a pure heart and everything. Now, in the film adaptation, it was more like he had to kind of earn that designation, and he does. But
they chose him more because they were running out of choices.
Essentially, yeah. But at the same time, and again, they were kind of going for like a more New 52, like he's a street urchin trying to make his way in the world, that kind of thing. Now the idea with Billy Batson is that he's someone who, well, he's just a kid. He's a normal human kid. Nothing extraordinary about him other than his sincerity and the fact that he was chosen, and he is able to become this, actually, in some interpretations, a being that is more powerful than Superman, because his powers derive from magic, which is actually a weakness of Superman, and he doesn't have a weakness to kryptonite. The major downfall that he has is, well, he's a kid, and he's got the intelligence and the immaturity level of a kid, and
so he lacks experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's, he's sheepish around girls, and he's not going to have the wisdom of a adult, he's just not. And so, I mean, that's its own kind of weakness. But yeah, Shazam is actually technically he's more powerful than Superman. He's just he lacks the wisdom of a fully fledged adult to really go along with it. Now, the more that he is a hero, then the more that he gains wisdom beyond his years. But still, I would argue that Shazam embodies that actually more than Superman. Superman is like an aspirational character, and Shazam is too, except that he actually is a human, whereas Superman is a Kryptonian. So
it's just a shame Captain Marvel's cape is so whack, It's got those tassels on it.
I always thought it was like a towel, like a hotel towel.
I like the New 52 version that has the hood. I think that looks really cool, and it helps to differentiate him from Superman even more.
Speaking of separate ideations,
what's that?
Keeping of like different characterizations, Lois Lane in this version to me is probably my favorite Lois Lane. We talk about like characters that should empower women and stuff like that, and yeah, I mean she to me is the embodiment of a strong woman that can still be the romantic lead, but that can still kick ass and does not need Superman to save her all the time. Now she sometimes becomes reckless and gets herself in trouble. She almost ends up like Bella Swan in some areas, but
respect. But then again, she also annoys me.
She desperately needs a spell checker.
She does that.
I think that's one of her. Again, like talking about really good screenwriting in the film, there are a lot of very little things that indicate character, that like these little details that really flesh out a character all throughout that script, and especially with Lois Lane, because of like when we first meet her, we know that she is a little bit of an attention whore, but not too much. Just enough that she has a hard time spelling, but she also has a good nose for journalism. She knows how the world works. She is a cynic, but it does work well for her. She, doesn't have time for just anybody, and especially not for a geek like Clark Kent. And all that stuff. Like we find that out very quickly, and it's like that's how you do exposition.
Well, and this is actually the first adaptation of Superman that we get where he does come off rather geeky, more geeky than normal. Because in the original 1950s TV series, he's not as geeky. He's more like a Perry Mason.
Yeah,
he's like a regular dude in a lot of the comics too. Like,
he's kind of suave in the Adventures of Superman. And actually, well, one of my not in live action, one of my favorite other media interpretations of Superman in general as a whole is easily Superman the Animated Series, because they get a really wide rogues gallery of villains. Superman does all his usual things, but he's not overly powerful. And like that depends on who's writing it, because like John Byrne weakened him significantly, and he also didn't have anywhere near as much powers in the 30s, and then like in the 50s he was severely overpowered. And so it's like it just depends on who's writing it. I like that in this film and in Superman the Animated Series, he's obviously powerful, but he's not like overly powerful to where like the laws of physics for the most part, that they can still affect him, like the fact that he's redirecting a missile, but it's still moving and it's still going to be kind of difficult to get it off that trajectory, all that stuff. And that's even more so in Superman Returns, where it's portrayed as harder for him to save that plane because like parts of the wings break off, and when he catches the nose section, that you see the ripple effect throughout the metal, and it's like, yeah, there's actual physics there. Now, granted, with the spinning the Earth backwards, I assume that the one thing that confused me about that, and always has, was he actually spinning the Earth backwards, or was that just a visualization of him going back in time? Like, was that just for the convenience of the audience? I never
feel
really
like if he did it for real, everyone on Earth would have died.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
that's
I
if
would
it's
think
just
so,
that
yeah.
starts
too.
some cataclysmic event.
I,
or
I
something,
feel like this falls into the category of don't think about it too hard.
Yeah.
Like the
Suspension
entire
Probably.
Power
disbelief.
Rangers movie.
I mean,
Hey,
I think I kind
watch
of
your
go
mouth.
of I'm of the opinion that I think it might have been just kind of creative license for the sake of the audience
Yeah.
to
Right.
like a visual for the audience to see,
Yeah.
to show him going back in time, because people are like, oh, well, why doesn't he do that all the time? Well, he was under immense
Well,
emotional stress, and like
Mhm.
even normal humans, when they're under immense stress, they are capable of physical feats that they wouldn't otherwise normally be capable of, and
Mhm.
so for him it's exacerbated many times
well,
over.
and in Star Trek, what was it? Not was it the Voyage Home, where they took a trip around the sun to
Yeah,
back in time? I much more believe that you can do it that way than you could probably doing it around the Earth.
Was that
yeah,
the one with the whales? Or was
Yeah.
that
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Now,
Like
what's
slingshot around
interesting
the sun.
actually, what's actually interesting about that, I noticed a few clues in the dialogue here. So, as Superman's ship, as Kal-El, the crystal ship's flying through space, you hear that each of the known galaxies has its own like laws of time and space, and plus I was a little confused because like in the beginning it says 1938, and then Lex Luthor says that the ship crashed in 1948, or no, that the planet
So,
exploded in 1948, and that it took 3 years for him to get there. Now, I wasn't sure if that meant, because keep in mind that we on Earth would not have known that that spot in the sky wasn't there anymore for quite a long time after that, because of light years and everything. So for all we know, that could have been the time when Earth astronomers would have noticed that that point in the sky was not
Yeah.
there anymore. For all we know, and also keep in mind that so he reached his 18th year as it's measured on Earth. By that reckoning, Jor-El says, I will have been dead for many thousands of your years. So, in other words, because of time is relative, basically. So,
right.
by that, it does introduce the fact that what we know of as time is very much affected by, well, how our planet rotates around the sun, how it rotates around its axis, how our galaxy functions, all that stuff. So there's actually quite a lot of clues that I think help to kind of debunk some of the things that people criticize the ending for. Plus,
Right.
people like to criticize the glasses thing. There's actually more to it than that, and they make that very
Yeah.
clear in
Well,
very subtle ways, like when Clark comes back. Well, Superman flies off. Lois is in a daze. Clark, knocks on the door, and like when she's not looking, like because you see him all hunched over, and he's got a higher
Right.
pitched voice. He's really meek and mild. And then when she's not looking, he stands up straight, shoulders back.
Right.
He's got a different look in his eyes, different expression. It's like and plus he's like layering his clothes a lot more and stuff. Like it's all very subtle, but at the same time, it's like you could because I watched this great defense of the glasses and why it's brilliant, and I was more cynical about it until that, but also Tom Cruise, to research the role of his hitman in Collateral, he basically hid in plain sight and
Right.
was able to fool people to
Right.
believing that he's not one of the most famous faces in the world. So I mean, if he can do it, Clark Kent can do it. Come
Well,
on.
and actually, I read an anecdote about this one where apparently Reeves would walk past the same people as Clark and as Superman, And as Clark, they just didn't even notice him. And as Superman, they were all like, ooh, that sort of. And then we saw an example of this a couple weeks ago with Brandon's pick of Give My Regards to Broad Street, where there was that anecdote where Paul McCartney was standing on a street corner playing Yesterday in that weird off-key way, and people thought he was a regular street performer and were giving him tips and everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, I exhibit those pieces of evidence on top of the ones I introduced. Like, I rest my case, cynics.
Well,
I
could buy it with
I
could buy it with just general people, but the Lois shit I always felt insulted by. Like, you telling me she's eyeballing that man meat and she doesn't notice it's friggin' Clark because of glasses.
Look near the end where you're like,
yeah, well,
you feel like she's about to say. I think Jimmy is there, and she's about to say something, and then she's like,
stops herself. Which actually, I think people that read the comics, I think they have much more of a point just because comics are meant to go on and on. Now, in the course of the first two films, you have, because she doesn't even really look at Clark all that much directly.
Second movie.
Yeah, well, she doesn't really look at him straight on that much. She really just kind of ignores him, and then like at the very end of this, you see the seed is planted in her mind. But then in the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, it actually starts off with her drawing some glasses onto Superman, like a picture of him, and making the connection right away to the point where she's willing to jump out of a window to prove it. And Clark,
Christ.
well, it's true. And then what Clark does is really clever. Super speeds down to the street level. Uses super breath to like break her fall, and she lands on an awning, and he runs back up as if he was there the whole time. And it's like, are you okay, Lois? And it's like, and that kind of helps throw her off the scent for a little while until she calls his bluff, and she actually shoots him with a gun, and she shoots him with a gun, and it doesn't hurt him. But it's only after he's already revealed it that she reveals that she shot him with blanks, just in case she was wrong. So, like, in that version of her character, more so than even in the theatrical cut, you're like, okay, I can see why Clark would like this girl. I can see why, she's not that dumb. You know what I mean? Like, she figures it out actually pretty quick and pretty believably too. So it's like, that was,
in the movies it's more forgivable for sure.
Well, and the way that they do it is really great
as a character. She's kind of arrogant as a character, and that really helps. But Christopher Reeve's performance as Clark Kent, to me, is one of the most believable ways that one could pull off a hide in plain sight Clark Kent with the glasses being different because of the mannerisms, because of the way he carries himself. He's the kind of guy that you don't look at in the face, that you kind of just like look at it like, and then ignore. That's that.
Well, and actually, just very quickly. So, in the original conception for Superman that Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster developed, they based Superman when he's actually dressed up on like a classic bodybuilder, like a Douglas Fairbanks or Johnny Weissmuller or something like that. And then when he's Clark Kent, they actually based that on Harold Lloyd, which makes sense because he looks like that, and so they based him on that. And you can see in the way that Christopher Reeve is playing Clark Kent, you can see almost like Woody Allen type mannerisms, and that's such a contrast to Superman, where he's like really confident and really, stands up straight. And like, it's such a transformation when you just see Clark Kent standing up straight and you're like, wow, he, you could really buy that this guy could hide in plain sight.
Just think, without the Clark Kent identity, Ty Sheridan in Ready Player One would not have been able to hide his regular avatar.
Yeah, exactly. what's interesting, and Kill Bill Volume, I think 2, made that interesting point that Batman wakes up in the morning and he's Bruce Wayne, but Superman wakes up in the morning and he's Superman, whereas Clark Kent's the disguise. And that has been a key defining feature of
Mhm.
the character. One of the few interpretations that did that differently was Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, where Superman became the necessary disguise for Clark to do his things. And so I thought, hey, that's interesting. Or even like something like Smallville, where it's all about Clark trying to figure out his place in the world, and he doesn't even
Mhm.
become Superman until the very end.
Mhm.
We were talking a little bit about
Smallville, I enjoyed the Lex Luthor character very much in Smallville.
Oh yeah, one of the best versions of him by far.
I've heard that was a good version. I still need to see the show, but
I
Yeah.
watched
Now-
it. I watched it up until like around season 8, and then I gave up. But I would like to. I'd like to finish the whole thing. But like the first couple
Mhm.
seasons are really good. Like it does get kind of Freak of the Weekish, but like the mythology episodes, the ones that really count, when they're good, they're fucking fantastic. Like up there with some of the best Superman adaptations outside of other media. Now when Smallville's bad, it's fucking terrible. So it really tremendous highs and lows with that show, but when it's good, it's really, really good.
So I wanted to say we're touching about trying to say some of the science behind it and some of the rationalization. To me, I want to pose something differently, is that we probably shouldn't bother with rationalizing or trying to, because this is the perfect film, all of them really, for suspension of disbelief. I mean, you think about it, like questions like when he turns back time, well, how come it edited out the missile hitting the fault when they did that? Or when my favorite that I asked myself, they sent this child through like years in space. How come when the Kents pulled him out, he wasn't covered in like crap as he was?
Right. Well, it was a self-cleaning.
And we didn't even touch on how many actors actually played Superman. Superman as he was growing up.
Yeah, there was 4. There was the very small toddler. Well, hold on. There was the baby. There was the small toddler. There was teenage Clark Kent, and that was actually Christopher Reeve overdubbing that actor, and then Christopher Reeve himself as an adult. Which
Jeff East was the actor, I think,
and he looked very darn close. And I have to say the 70s were not known for their good dubbing at all. But I have to say, out of all the 70s dubs that I've ever seen, this was pretty damn good. Like for a long time, I didn't know that his lines were overdubbed, but they match up really well, and I was like, wow, I'm shocked.
And actually, speaking of the science of the film, one thing we haven't really gotten into that we probably should, since we're at an hour and 13, is the basic plot. In addition to being a Superman origin story, you've also got Luthor's weird plot, which basically the dude's lair is deep under the city, and he's got a really cool lair. It's just really way down below the city. But
it looks like it's like an old remnant of maybe a part of the subway that he might have blocked off or something.
It kind of reminds me of the television series Beauty and the Beast, where Vincent had his lair.
Well, it also has shades of we just watched Into the Spider-Verse, where there were those subway tunnels that were abandoned that a lot of the action took place in.
Well, and
also a lot of the Batman stories have gotten into how much takes place under Gotham.
Well, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 Secret News was under.
Why did no one put forward the Ninja Turtles for Superhero Month? I don't get that. But anyway,
good question.
So the basic idea, though, Luthor has apparently quietly been buying up the desert Southwest, and he plans to trigger the San Andreas Fault in such a way that it'll sink California, and he will suddenly have acres upon hundreds of acres of oceanfront property, making him like the richest man on earth.
But
It is a great cheesy Bond level supervillain scheme. It's totally not the kind of scheme that the modern Luthor would do, but for like an old school
kind of a feel.
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like old school Bond. You could see him being a charter member of Spectre.
Yeah, no, didn't Blofeld do something like that in Diamonds Are Forever?
Maybe. I can't remember the
It was
plot of
something.
that.
It was something like that, or maybe I'm just
Right.
thinking of the desert setting. But it's an interesting thing because it's one of those things where it's like, even though that did predate, white collar crime, Lex Luthor, in a way though that kind of is something that white collar criminals have done. I mean, like the plot
He's
of
a real estate mogul. I mean, what better way to be a white collar super criminal than to be a real estate mogul?
we don't have any of those.
I know. I can't think of
But what's interesting though is that even going further back than that, the plot of Chinatown was based on a real event of land snatching and that kind of thing.
Except that
I did
this
like
movie was
the
entertaining.
I did like
Yeah,
that
well,
the interview with the Indian was it? Sorry, no, Native American
Right.
fellow there that was that Lois was doing, and she's like, you know what the price is? I don't care if it's Custer buying up the land.
Yeah.
In fact, I hope
Well,
it is.
well, and there's a good
Shame on
foreshadowing.
him.
There's a good foreshadowing of him like telling her to keep her eyes on the road. So like that kind of plants the seed in our
Yeah.
minds that she's gonna get into car trouble. And then actually in the 3 hour cut, you see a little bit of a coda where the dam water starts to trickle through the desert land. They're like, water, yay, we got our water back. And so that was a good way to close that off. But yeah, it's one of those things where it is a real estate scam. And, well, actually, it was in one of the Evening with Kevin Smith things where he talks about how much to him he thought that Superman Returns was really boring. And yeah, they did recycle the real estate scam thing, which was not wise. But the funny part was that he was like, they couldn't have thought of a better plot for him than land. But it's like, but which, he's from he's from Smallville, I guess, in the Midwest. Because he's like a Midwestern huckster, which he's from Smallville, I guess, just in the Midwest, and he is a bit of a huckster. Well, I guess they were right. But I mean, it also depends on which version of the story you're talking about.
My biggest thing about Lex Luthor is how the hell did he come across the Necklace of Kryptonite?
Well, they stole it from. They stole it from. They make it clear in the Daily Planet where Perry White's talking to Clark, and that there was a break-in in that I cannot remember the country's name.
2 people
Broken.
died.
6 people died. It's a little quick bit of exposition, but
Superman by the time of the heist. Okay.
What?
He already knows about Superman by the time of the heist.
Yes, I mean, that's one thing with the film is that it does not we're led to believe that things take place over a more extended period than they're shown, because otherwise it would have taken that would have been way too quick of a turnaround for that to be possible if it was to have taken place the next day or whatever. But we're led to believe that we're led to believe that other things have happened that over another period of time that we haven't seen. But that's just a way to let us know that happened without us having to see it. I mean, because other things like rigging the missile and all that takes a while to get through. But one thing I didn't realize that actually is kind of clever. Otis's fuck up with the first missile.
Yeah, right.
That actually proves to be a blessing in disguise because of That's right, Superman. Double jeopardy. Even you with your great speed couldn't stop both of them. And that's which actually how it should have ended. They made fun of that because they're like, hang on a second. You mean these missiles? And I went around the Earth 10 times. These are the only missiles I could find. Are you sure these are the ones? And which that was really funny. But at the same time, keep in mind that they also set up very clearly with the flying Lois in the night sky thing. They're like, oh, we forgot to time ourselves. And so it's like, look, and keep in mind, he hadn't actually formally measured his strength, his flight speed, anything like that. So he hadn't really been tested yet. So I would also submit that as evidence for that point.
Well, I read that apparently some people with too much time on their hands did do the calculations based on when he flew around the Earth, and he was going almost light speed. So I guess that's theoretically where that would be at. But I do, and as far as the missile, the scenes with Luther and Miss Tessmacher and Otis, that was a really fun sequence. And in particular, we have to call out the part where Luther blows up a car and they have Miss Tessmacher laying out the road so the convoy will stop to rescue her. And then you have the captain come in, wait, we need to give her CPR.
Vigorous chest massage and mouth to mouth.
You go call someone. Everyone, mouth face. And what's really funny is, in case anyone didn't catch it or didn't realize it, that was Larry Hagman, pre-Dallas role, going to become one of the biggest stars of television. But that was a fun little cameo.
And this lady, it was Valerie Perrine, and I remember her in Slaughterhouse-Five as being the sex symbol in the soldier's mind. So
and she also
mention though,
she won a BAFTA. She won a BAFTA for most promising newcomer to leading film roles for her role as Honey Bruce in the film Lenny, about Lenny Bruce. She did a really good job in that, and I think even the extended cut gives some more business for her to do, and for Jimmy Olsen. Actually, they get fleshed out a little bit more. And but yeah, that was a really funny scene. And as far as cameos go, actually, there is a scene that was cut out of the theatrical cut that was put into the Richard Donner cut, and then also into the 3-hour cut of a young Lois Lane seeing Clark run fast, and her parents are played by Noel Neal and Kirk Allen. And they played Superman and Lois Lane in the 40s theatrical serials, which is really cool.
That's kind of cool.
Also, it is worth noting the scene after the missiles were launched. I believe the person at the controls is a young John Ratzenberger, who pre-cheers John Ratzenberger.
And like almost every Pixar film.
Yes, I was going to say he now is the go-to guy for Pixar.
or he was. I don't know if he's still that way anymore.
I think he gets like tiny roles most of the time, but
well, because for quite a while he was the guy, because he was in every Toy Story, but Bug's Life, Finding Nemo, just like what wasn't this guy in,
Right.
But it's really cool stuff. I mean, and plus the publicity for this film allowed the much maligned and screwed over Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster to get their restored byline to Superman, and they got a lifetime pension. I mean, because they got cheated out of so much money.
It's another connection with another Richard Donner film, because again, I think I mentioned with Maverick that Roy Huggins, the creator, got screwed out of that by Warner's, and the movie restored his credit for the first time.
So thanks to Richard Donner for that. I mean, that helped to really raise awareness and get them their due credit back. Now, they didn't get all the royalties and stuff that they were entitled to, but they did,
Right.
at least get their pension and their credit and their proper place in the comic book echelons as they deserve, because without them, without these two, Jewish kids from Cleveland, Ohio that had a dream, and I say Jewish specifically because that was at a time when it was really hard for Jews to get decently paying work, especially in what was then a prestigious field, which was comic strip writing and drawing. But then the reprints of comic strips became comic books, and then from there original content became a thing, and that's where Superman was born. It's just like they couldn't really get a lot of work, and so these two kids with a dream, boom, they created this character that will endure for forever, I think.
So, what do y'all think about going ahead and talking a little bit about the effects and such on this one?
I mean, the flight effect was just record breaking at the time. I mean,
yeah.
Well, the tagline said,
people
"You'll
minimize
believe a
it
man
now.
can fly."
Oh yeah, and people did. I mean, the effects were up there with Star Wars in terms of being revolutionary. I think that, well, watching it now, like, I think the effects of the original Star Wars trilogy age significantly better than these effects do, even though on the whole I think they age well. It's just mostly I'm thinking about some of the composite shots of some of the more complex flying, like if Superman has to fly at like an angle instead of just straight on, then some of the kind of outline of the composite, frame relative to the motion of the camera, like some of those, can some of those can be a little, they don't composite together as well. But then some of those straight on shots, they actually composite together really well. Like especially when Superman first debuts in the evening and he's flying, and you see some of that upside down camera work, and the lighting changes along with the camera motion, along with the change of the skyline, like that. That looks fantastic to this day.
And it is worth noting that one of the reasons Christopher Reeve got the role was he knew how to fly, if that makes sense. Apparently, he is well known because it led, unfortunately, to his paralysis for having a lot of sporty hobbies. He apparently was a hang glider. That was one of his big things. So he knew how to move, how to behave like he was going through the air. And apparently most of the people screen tested didn't have a clue how to do it.
I'd love to take a look at those.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
I want to see some of those.
There are some screen tests, and some of the other choices are like, wow, why did they even remotely consider these people?
Right.
But Christopher Reeve, like, I mean, I don't think it needs to be, it's so abundantly clear that Christopher Reeve, out of all the people that have ever they've ever played Superman, I think it's pretty safe to say Christopher Reeve, he didn't play Superman, he was Superman. Like, he really looked like he walked right off the pages of the comics, and to this day, nobody has ever, I think, embodied a comic book character as 100% perfectly as he did.
Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool, I would argue.
Yeah, I mean, but again, you wouldn't have that without him having laid the groundwork for. True. I mean, and especially because Superman, that is seriously like tip top. Like that is again, not to be too on the nose with the already obvious Christ parallels, but it's like if you have an actor playing Jesus, it's like that actor has got to be like tip top and has got to bring something new to it, and has got to like that's one of those like seriously like tip top kind of iconic figures of history, mythology, religion, culture, however you want to say it. Like that, Superman is up there with one of those characters that people that we all know that you still have to, you got to hit all these specific notes and you got to somehow make it original. So that is not easy to do, and he did it beyond
The only
belief.
thing that I wish that he could have done is gone into a telephone booth and changed.
Well,
Please.
they
did a great little nod to that.
They did. That was so funny. Well, and then they did an homage to the idea of that with the revolving door there.
Right.
But yeah, I love that they had him look at the phone booth, and it wasn't an actual booth. And then nowadays, if kids are watching that, they're like, "What's that?"
I did think it was a little wonky when he jumped off the building and changed in midair. I was like, nah, that's not quite right. But yeah.
Where do the clothes go? There's just some man's discarded clothes somewhere. Like,
what they didn't really to borrow a concept from another franchise altogether. Apparently, we don't really realize this from the movie, but Superman is a master of requip magic.
Well, I think you might leave the magic up to Shazam there, but
right.
You know,
that's all he can do is change his costume.
Well, actually, yeah, I mean, with Shazam, it makes sense because the lightning bolt, it doesn't matter what he's wearing, his costume, his physique, everything changes,
Right.
and what's actually really cool is on one of the several occasions that Superman and Shazam have fought, either in comics or in TV shows or whatever. It was in Justice League Unlimited, I want to say, that forget the exact circumstances of which, but Shazam has Superman, like he's holding him like in a bear hug, and he says the magic word Shazam, and it zaps Superman like right in the chest, and it's actually doing some pretty serious damage to him because, well, it's magic and it's hurting him pretty seriously. And he keeps doing it over and over again until Superman gets the upper hand and the lightning bolt actually hits him, and then he becomes a Billy Batson again. It's like, oh fuck, you know.
I think it's Marvel versus DC, the comic, or one of those. I know for sure it's Thor though. Like, you know, he says Shazam and the lightning bolt hits Thor's hammer and like just jacks him up.
Oh, I bet.
Nice.
I mean, Thor and Superman, they would make a pretty even match, I would think.
I think so.
Theoretically, you would imagine that Superman would be someone who could pick up Mjolnir.
Yeah, I want to say there was like a
the Hulk couldn't do it though. The Hulk couldn't do it.
Well, didn't they have that thing? I think they had that one where like Captain America could budget, but no one else could.
Well, I mean, the Mjolnir decided in Avengers Endgame anyway, decided that Captain America was worthy at that moment. But I mean, that's really that's the big difference, is that it isn't about strength there. Mjolnir decides who is worthy to possess the power of Thor, and very, very few people in the comics have possessed it. There was, well, Thor himself, but also Thor / Donald Blake, you know, as well as Beta Ray Bill and Jane
Ray Bill
and Jane Foster, yeah.
I do want to mention on the effects that this one, they gave the movie a special Oscar for the effects. This predated the effects category, and I'm wondering if this one and Star Wars were the reasons why they put that category into place. You know, kind of like Elephant Man is part of the reason there's a makeup category, you know, so that's sometimes you get the ones that are ahead of their time and they kind of have to run to catch up.
Definitely.
We also should think about the music because
oh my god, yes.
A lot of people forget about it now because it's been played so much, it kind of fades out, but it's so iconic. It's so
I have to say, though, it is iconic, but it is a John Williams score directly on the heels of his score for Star Wars. He used the same orchestra. There's a lot of similar notes.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot. Williams, and I've talked a lot on our channel about how he keeps cannibalizing himself for Star Wars, and it pisses me off. Yeah. But he occasionally does cannibalize himself for others, even though this one is an iconic score. It cannibalizes Star Wars. Even though Harry Potter was an iconic score, it cannibalized Home Alone. He really does use a lot of his same notes over and over again, but it's still a damn good score.
That's not as bad as Hans Zimmer as far as cannibalizing himself, or rather,
people love him so much.
I fucking love him prior to Batman Begins, and then that's where everything started to sound the same. But I think he was starting to get out of that like once Interstellar happened.
Zimmer did the score for Lion King, didn't he? Now that was a great
the animated one, yeah,
the actual music score,
and he won an Oscar for it. But I mean, my favorite score of his is by far The Last Samurai. That was like that one's kind of like the anti Batman Begins, like onward, like where everything is like really brassy, loud, bombastic. Last Samurai is actually quite soft and delicate and beautiful. But with John Williams' score for this, you can definitely owe the sound of this score to Star Wars because it's in a similar milieu, except that I would argue this is more overtly heroic and it's also more romantic, especially with it actually kind of helps bridge Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, because Raiders of the Lost Ark was a dedicated hero, but also with a dedicated romance theme. And I also give a special shout out to the villains march, that kind of doofy. I
do want to say though, it's nowhere near as iconic as the Imperial March. I will say that.
Oh well, but yeah, I mean that's also like if the Imperial March is like your in terms of villain school, the Imperial March is like the valedictorian honor student, and then the March of the Villains here is like the fuck up who just barely passed, you know.
Although I gotta say, I now have this thought in my head of I just want to see Luther go face to face with the Emperor and with Darth Vader. I just he would be trying so hard to screw with them.
Yeah, he would try to
it would be hilarious.
Way out of it.
One thing I will say,
a good Star Wars connection. I do want to mention a good Star Wars connection. David Prowse, who actually played Vader, didn't voice him, but played him, was Christopher Reeve's body trainer for this film. So that's a nice little connection there too.
Well, I think he thought he voiced him until he heard James Earl Jones on there.
Well, and David Prowse was also the writer's bodyguard in the second half of A Clockwork Orange as well, which is pretty cool. Wow. But I think with the score of this film, it's one of John Williams' best by far, and it helped to lay the groundwork for what we think of as the score for a superhero film. Just like how the movie itself, it pioneered the idea of what a superhero film could be. And then we should start wrapping up, but one thing that I will want to extra special shout out to someone that we haven't mentioned, who I think is not typically mentioned when talking about this film, is actually Ned Beatty. Because Ned Beatty, he is an amazing actor, comedically and dramatically, like especially like in Network, he acts his ass off in that thing, and like really like hardcore serious role. And then here, total opposite, where he's just like the dumbest person ever, but he does it so well. And it's like, but it's like you have to be, in order to play really stupid characters, you yourself have to be pretty damn smart, because you have to. Go ahead.
But he's kind of like Tim Blake Nelson and Oh Brother Wart Thou, who apparently the dude is brilliant, but he's so good at playing complete morons.
Exactly. But I think that does need to be said, though, that you, in order to play really stupid characters, you yourself tend to have to be pretty smart, and usually the ones who do that well, they tend to be really, really smart. So extra special props.
What was that thing Luther said about him? Like, I'm amazed he has enough brain cells to move his legs, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or enough brain power.
Exactly. Oh, and,
I will say-
a part that always stuck out to me was Otisburg, and I was like, that's just, I don't know, that's just funny. I would
Right.
love to see a real town called Otisburg, because
I'm sure there is.
there is a real town in Kansas called Metropolis,
Mhm.
and they have like Superman merch and everything. I don't know if there's a real Smallville, but there is a real Metropolis, which Metropolis in the comics and in the movies generally is a stand-in for New York City, except that in the Smallville TV series, it pretty much is like Kansas City. Like geographically, that's where it seems to be.
I tend to think that Otisburg would probably have gotten its name more from Andy Griffith's show than from this, but
Quite possibly.
I will say as just a last word on the score before I could get out is, though, yes, there are similarities, and really all three of those Star Wars, Superman, and Indiana Jones, there may be similarities, but I can tell you right now that you could play the music and the soundtracks from each of those, and you wouldn't go, which one of those three is that? No,
Yeah,
you'll
exactly.
identify it right away. They are distinct, and
I would
they're
say
similar, but they are distinct.
for me, Indiana Jones would be immediate, Star Wars close behind. This would be the hardest of the three, but you're right generally. Yeah. Especially if you do the most iconic pieces from the scores. Yeah, there's no question.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Do we have favorite scenes? I already said mine, which was the first Fortress of Solitude, and especially like especially when Clark enters his kind of out of body experience training period. That by the time we reach the confines of your galaxy, 12 of your years will have passed, and it's like I really, again, I love that it just totally breaks the idea of time and space, and he even mentions, in this next year we'll discuss the various concepts of immortality and their basis and their basis in actual fact. And so it's like, see, that there's a whole level of knowledge that Krypton has discovered that humans can't even comprehend yet. And I think that really just thematically, and it just sets him on his journey. But it's just, man, I don't think more beautiful dialogue has ever been written for, certainly not for superhero films, and you'd be hard pressed for a lot of films in general as well.
Agreed.
Try to avoid the smell.
I get a kick out of that very beginning where we get all the council of
Krypton,
Krypton saying guilty, and you get Zod saying, one day you'll bow down to Zod, and then of course this square sheet metal comes and just takes them up into what is it, the
Phantom Zone,
the unknown zone,
the Phantom Zone,
the Phantom Zone, which is just mirror zone or whatever, and
well,
they're all.
It's
that's Mirror's
what it actually is just like an everlasting void, and it's something that in the in Smallville they portray it as sort of almost like this post-apocalyptic wasteland from which there is no escape, and they have actual like phantoms, like wraiths patrolling the place, which this is obviously different. It's more just like purgatory or limbo or something, and it's something that like they said it was like a living death basically. So I would assume that it's just a place where one's consciousness and physical form, where it can just be perpetually kind of stuck in like no particular place or time, and so you wouldn't necessarily age or anything. You'd just there would be no time, But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
That whole scene is terrifying, man. Just
it is.
The way it looks is crazy. That's probably my favorite scene. If I had to choose like a serious one, would be a tie between that and just that whole sequence where he's on the pod too. For some reason, like that's just my favorite part of the movie. Probably
like there were like two child actors that played the baby, because there was one moment where you saw the child have like a little head of hair, and then when he stood up, it's like
you're
yeah.
right. I think there's a couple of them. Yeah.
Yeah, you might be right on that now that I think of it. But I mean the Terrence Stamp as Zod, like it's one of those things where he's such a footnote in this particular film, but man, does he kill it in the next one. And even just his setup in this one is incredible because he's Terrence Stamp and he's awesome. And he would later go on to be the voice of Jor-El in Smallville, which is pretty cool.
I'll have to revisit, most definitely.
I think if I had to pick an all-time favorite part, though, it's when he jumps in front of the train. I can never watch that shit without laughing to death. Yeah, like that. I always have to pretty much rewind it at least once or twice just to see him do it again.
I have to go more comedic too. I think honestly there are a couple of scenes with Luthor and Otis and Tessmacher in the lair that are probably my favorites. Just like that whole setup is just great, and they played off each other really well. And again, Hagman was such an underrated as a comedic actor, but just generally a very talented actor. And there were, of course, a couple of great moments with Christopher Reeve Clark as well, Clark Superman as well.
Oh, yeah.
He had a couple of really great little clippy one-liners and things like that. And so I'm not clearly thinking of my favorite one offhand, so I won't bother trying to come up with one, but there were some good ones.
My favorite has got to be the whole discussion of his evil plan. One, because it's a throwback to old Bond movies in so many ways, and two, just it embodies the Hackman Luthor versus the Reeves Superman. It really does show the whole struggle between the two. So to me, that's just an excellent scene on many levels.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So to me, that just holds up. With Otisburg, or even how they end the scene with him just smashing the cane down and just cracking it, and that's.
Oh yeah. Well, and you could buy that this Lex.
He's just fantastic the whole time, man. I mean,
he is, but like you could buy that this Lex would be that conceited to where he would feel totally okay with revealing everything about his plan because he's just so conceited that there's just no way that anybody could fuck up this plan, because that's just and like it goes well, it goes like beyond like that is kind of a cliche, except in his case you really do believe that this character really does believe that there's just no way that this can fail. And it's like with other ones, you feel like, oh, they're just going through the motions because that's what's expected, because that's the cliche. But with this, like, you really believe that this character sincerely believes that his plan could not fail at all. Because he's smart.
In a sense, that's a callback to probably the greatest Bond villain line of all. And that's the one where Art Goldfinger says, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die."
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's just a great, and it's in that same mindset. I do like I meant to say before, I want to do one shout out as well to the costuming in this film.
Yes.
This is the film apparently that introduced the whole idea that the S is the family crest in the canon. So that is kind of cool that they canon actually picked something up from the film. And I've heard differing reports on whether it was Brando's idea or not, but I'm sure he felt compelled to take credit for it. But on top of that, Superman is actually in a comics faithful outfit.
Yes.
And you can't overlook those Stalin duds they gave Luthor. I mean, they would like scream 70s, but they
I
love it so much.
And the numerous wigs that he wears, like he
refused to wear a bald cap except that one time. So they styled his hair so it would look like he was wearing a wig.
and very different.
Well, shit, he knew that stuff was going away and soon, like he didn't want to get bald sooner than he needed to.
And very, very different wigs too. It's not like he was trying to necessarily pass, for having hair. It was like his hair can look
Like
wildly
that one
different.
with the gray streaks on the sides. And
Yeah, it's like he gets bored, and that also adds an interesting element to his character. But you're
Right.
absolutely right. Like Superman, part of on top of his sincerity, but it's like Christopher Reeve, like costume wise, like there's nothing about the suit that isn't comics correct. It's perfect, 100%, and he just that's why it's like he was Superman and will always be Superman. Um, and especially like after he was paralyzed, like his amazing heroism and activism and just the spirit with which he took his disability and then his tragically shortened life, like that was the most heroic, Superman thing that he ever did, and it's like that alone makes him worthy of that designation.
Mhm.
Well, shall we wrap up?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Very
Oh,
good, very
okay.
lively, very good, very lively discussion, I should think. But yeah, if you want to go first, Jake.
I'll save my outro for the end of the second one. I'll
Okay.
move forward a little bit.
Okay.
Just check out Septum Sin versus the World for both of us, and hopefully Jake
Yeah.
will let us know when his channel comes back to life again.
Yeah,
And
hopefully.
check out Indie Horror Film Creative for me.
Hmm.
Check out Inside Movies Galore next, folks.
Mhm.
Going to be an exciting next discussion. And Mo,
And probably shorter than this, but it's also an hour and a half or even less as opposed to a 3-hour movie.
depending on how awake Dustin is.
Mhm.
Just sub up my channel, Drunken Master Studios. Just did a torso review. It's a good time.
All right.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Did I lose my internet right now?
Stay tuned for a movie of equal quality. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie.
Oh,
Equal quality, equal level of influence and talent and
Exactly.
thematic significance, everything.
Same number of Oscar-involved people.
Right.
Definitely.
Alrighty.
All right.
Folks.
Hey.
Good night.